Example 4 of section 5.5 is really where the Algebra 2 comes into play as far as this section is concerned. So example 4 deals with what's called composite functions. So you're taking two functions and you're combining them. Okay, you're kind of like putting one inside the other. So here they give me f of x is x squared, g of x is x plus 1. They want us to investigate what happens for these different scenarios. They want us to find the value of f of g of 3. That's how you say that, f of g of 3. And for these problems, the key is you work inside out. Okay, that's the key to these problems right here. Work inside out. So start on the inside, they give me g of 3. Literally what that's telling us to do, and you did this all the way back in Algebra 1, is take my g function, and wherever I see an x, I'm plugging in a 3. Okay, so looking back up here, if I have g of 3, it's going to be 3 plus 1. Okay, g of 3 equals 4. From there, we're now left with, okay, so g of 3 is 4. We're left with f of 4. So we go to our f function, and wherever I see an x in the f function, I'm plugging in 4. Leaves me with 4 squared. F of 4 equals 16. Done. That's it. That's what they're asking you to do there. Okay, so it's nothing too crazy, at least in my opinion, it's not. Tricky one, I guess, could be B. You look at B, they want us to find f of g of x. So when they're asking for f of g of x, I'm not plugging anything in for g, so I just go to whatever the function is, x plus 1, and it gives us f of x plus 1. F of x plus 1, just like we did in the last one, is wherever I see an x in the f function, I have to plug in x plus 1. So f of x plus 1 is going to equal x plus 1 squared. And then this is just a simple foiling problem that you've done a bunch of times. Remember, we write it out twice. You FOIL, distribute, whatever you want to call it. But regardless of how you do it, you're going to end up with x squared plus 2x plus 1. Okay, so there's example 4. Composite function, just taking two separate functions and combining them. Example 5 is more of the same. It does get a little more difficult, though. They give you the concept up here, definition, so if you want to read that over, you can. In my opinion, it muddies things up a little more than it helps. Really, the only takeaway from here is when they write it f o g of x, that's the same as f of g of x. Okay, so f o g is f of g. If it was g o f, it would be g of f of x. But anyways, you're doing much the same that we did in the previous one. So for A, we're going to have f of g of x. So that's the same as f of x minus 5. Okay. From there, you are just plugging in to our square root function. So it's going to equal, I don't know why I put an arrow there, but it equals the square root of x minus 5 plus 7. Okay. Go ahead, combine your like terms. And we're going to end up with f of g of x equaling the square root of x plus 2. Now, with these, you need to make sure that we state the domain on it. So since I have a square root, we will have a restriction on the domain. Remember, square root, we can only do 0 or positive numbers. So since 0 is the smallest number that we can take the square root of, I got to figure, okay, what could I plug in for x to make it 0? It'd be negative 2. So my domain, I'm going to go x, negative 2. And then since we can include negative 2, like we can take the square root of 0, it's going to be every value greater than or equal to negative 2. Okay, so this would be our answer right there. All right. And then B is the most, it's not difficult, but it's tedious problem of the day. So with this, like you're just doing a bunch of math skills here, honestly. If we're going f of g of x, that tells me that in my f function, wherever I see an x, I'm plugging in 4 minus x. So this is where the fun begins. I have x squared. So in parentheses, we're going to have 4 minus x squared plus x. So that's 4 minus x plus 2. Okay. This first one right here, it's a FOIL. Okay, so you go ahead and write it out twice. And when we multiply this out, distribute, FOIL, whatever you got to do, it's going to turn into 16 minus 8x plus x squared. Nothing else happens with the rest so far, so just drop it down. And then it's like terms from here. So x squared, that's all I have, it's just an x squared. X's, I have a negative 8x minus x gets me to negative 9x. And then numbers wise, I have 16 plus 4 is 20, plus 2 is 22. So this problem actually wasn't that bad. Domain, there's no fractions, there's no square roots, so domain's simple. It's just going to be all real numbers. And that is all of section 5.5.